side. His next step was to visit Karen at her workplace. He greets the girl and asks her, if an external enemy were to try to invade their bunker, how would they do it? She thinks about it and says the most obvious way would be to blow up the base. They would have to use explosives in the same way they do to demolish buildings. However, she explains that to blow up this location, it would require a ton of C4. So unless they have an absurd amount of explosives, they won't have problems. Now, regarding the request he made earlier, Karen prepared the explosives he asked for earlier to make. She also adapted a bulletproof vest to mimic the high-ranking soldier's uniform from the mountain base he requested. Karen is curious about what plans he has for asking for these things. Zhang Yi says she will understand when the time comes. Meanwhile, at the village base, Chun even more mutant soldiers who will assist in the invasion of the protagonist's base. The main forces of the base are here, and they also introduce a newer mutant who will join the high-level military forces. Professor Liang is also part of the special forces here and recognizes the otaku. He is one of the people who were with the man who rescued her student Shinshin from college and stole her sword. Even though she doesn't like these people for abandoning their students, she keeps it to herself. The other soldiers ask what Chun's power is, and he says he can control ice. He made all the ice houses himself. The captain prepares the soldiers for the attack with full force. On the security cameras, the protagonist realizes that gas grenades were used around the entire mansion, so he puts on his combat uniform and tells everyone to go to the underground as he ordered before. He watches anxiously through the window to destroy everyone who's here. The soldiers crawl closer to the house and position explosives. The captain is eager, and a large explosion occurs, and all the traps in front must have been rendered useless. Now they can approach the house and start positioning tons of C4 to bring down the front walls of the place. While they stack the explosives, the protagonist was lurking, and they had thought of a plan. Before the explosives were triggered, the captain says he expected more from Zhang Yi. This time he didn't even try to retaliate and was caught off guard. He couldn't even react to this perfect attack. He activated the detonator E, and somehow they could see the impact of the explosion. When they activated the trigger, nothing happened. They were puzzled as they couldn't see the explosives through binoculars, only a small destruction on the ground where the explosives were stacked. Meanwhile, inside the luxury mansion, the protagonist returned to see the girls and explained that everything is fine. The underground base is the strongest part, and they are safe here. What he did was absorb the impact of the explosion into his storage, and now they have no more explosives to pose any danger for the time being. He calmed his girls down, and for some time, the situation is under his control, so now they can relax. Then he receives a message from Otaku Chun. He heard the sound of explosions and wants to know if he's okay. Zhang Yi replies that he is and wants to know what the soldiers are doing now. They returned to the base and gave the order to send more supplies and explosives for a new attempt to invade Zhang Yi's mansion. The protagonist warns Chun to always stay alert to what's happening around him. Sitting with his two beauties, Zhang Yi is sure that Chun's village will come into conflict with the soldiers due to their shortcomings. Meanwhile, in the village, one of the soldiers informed the leader that they needed food for 65 people right away. Chun begins to realize that so many people here for a longer time will consume all the village's food stocks. The leader agrees with this, but asks how long it would take to destroy Zhang Yi's base. They've been there once and returned unsuccessfully. This question angers the soldier, so he doesn't answer, just says it's confidential. The old man apologizes for interfering and then orders Chun to build ice houses for all the soldiers who will stay overnight in the village. The next day, the new explosives arrived for them, a mutant with the power of Shingeki no Kyojin. The captain used their strength to hurl the explosives to fall onto Zhang Yi's base. The protagonist saw the explosives flying, then activated his ability to release the explosion from the previous attack to reflect the crate of explosives. The impact threw back the giant square of C4 onto the soldiers. They threw themselves on the ground trying to protect themselves, and then the boom of the overwhelming explosion. Dozens of soldiers were reduced to ashes. The protagonist was satisfied with the result. Meanwhile, the captain wonders how this was possible. Could that person's power do something like this? As he lamented, a shot almost hit the captain's head. Luckily, he dodged 2 shots in a row. Zhang Yi said, but he wasn't the least bit sad about it. As he gave more orders, another soldier was hit right in the middle of the forehead. Luckily, his mutant power was great resistance in his body. Not even projectiles could penetrate his skull. Zhang Yi noticed the movement of other soldiers, and from 2 different positions, shots came in his direction. With his storage ability, he absorbed both bullets and said that this was too easy. He then repelled the bullets in the exact direction of the 2 shooters, and both were sent to eternal sleep with Jesus. Everything was going very well. Then a very strong vibration almost knocked him out of the window. The captain, with so much hatred, decided to attack the structure of the house himself. Facing his enemy in the eyes, he knew he didn't have the strength to destroy these walls, so this battle with Zhang Yi would be postponed once again, but he promises to destroy this base even if it costs him his own life. Zhang Yi recognizes that he has incredible strength and speed. He must be a formidable enemy, but only if he can get in. Once again, the soldiers return to the village defeated. Now even more irritated, the soldier orders them to shut up and stop complaining. They need even more food to regain their strength for the next battle. This time, the captain says it needs to be the best food they have stored. The villagers are no longer in favor of supporting the military. Further ahead, the tallest soldier suggests that they should teach these inferior and petty people a lesson. However, the captain replies that he also feels like it, but until Zhang Yi is defeated, they are free labor and food suppliers for them. Furthermore, when everything is over, they will be used at the mountain base to produce energy by pedaling bicycles. Jokir checks to see if his man was injured. Once again, he was victorious and had no injuries. Yang Mi brings his meal, and as he eats, the protagonist asks Karen about the damage to the structure and if she can fix it. She informs him and says that it's all a matter of having the materials. Moreover, she has to go outside to fix it, and at this moment, it's not safe. Just knowing that it's possible is enough. There's no rush for it. He drinks his beverage, and the other girls also want some. They all toast to celebrate another victory. Later, at dinner time, Shinshin informs the protagonist that Professor Liang contacted him. She hands him her phone, and the woman says by message that she intends to negotiate. Before calling the professor, the protagonist asks Shinshin if this woman is trustworthy. She confirms that she always keeps her word. Liang insists on speaking on the phone. She reveals that she's infiltrated the military forces of the Western Mountain Base and can exchange favors with Zhang Yi. The professor says that her students at the base are in danger, so she has no choice but to cooperate. She can be useful to him inside, and all she wants in return is the safety of her students. He responds that when he has something to ask in return, he will get in touch. The protagonist hangs up the phone and tells the girls about the situation of the people in that base on the Western Mountain. Karen, upon learning the fate of her college colleagues, feels sad. Even though she wasn't friends with anyone, she also didn't wish harm upon them. Zhang Yi questions if Shinshin's plan to create a Trojan horse is possible. The girl on 4 wheels says that Professor Liang could infiltrate the base and insert a flash drive so she could access the base's internal systems. Zhang Yi calls back and says that his request is for her to take a flash drive and put it into a computer at the base afterward. She agrees and will trust his word because risking her life to save one of his students who was important to him shows he is a man of value. Later, the captain informs all the villagers that the military is still at the base to save them from the demon that could return to destroy their people. The village should unite and cooperate to destroy the demon that lives on the other side of the lake. The captain goes to the meeting room and warns that the time until the villagers' revolt is short, and some villagers would surely die seeking revenge for the death of their loved ones. This obviously sparked Liang's indignation, being in favor of goodness, and she told him she couldn't bring herself to sacrifice innocent people just to achieve their desires. In response, Feng stated that if she had any other solution to avoid confrontation with the villagers, he was willing to listen. A second leader tried to calm her and explain that she should help them obtain resources from Zhang Yi so that their students could live safely. Hearing this, Professor Liang lost hope and then began pretending to be on their side, as the lives of her students were more important than those of the villagers. She agreed with Feng as long as he tried to avoid the death of the villagers due to overwork. Feng instructed the villagers to prepare to dig tunnels, urging them to unite to rid themselves of the demon, Zhang Yi, once and for all. However, the villagers began to oppose, fearing dialogue. Even when the old village leader tried to intervene and convince them that Zhang Yi's death would bring them peace, they all refused to participate in the excavation, at first because Zhang Yi had never attacked them since they made a peace agreement with him. This left Liang worried, and she called Zhang Yi to inform him about the situation. She wanted to know what his next move would be. Zhang Yi said he would let them dig as they pleased. He had the situation under control. The teacher then asked for his home address. She needed to know, wouldn't he come to fetch her later? Zhang Yi simply said that things would happen in due time. The next morning, they attacked Zhang Yi's bunker from all sides, while he watched without concern, as if he were in a movie. However, Yang Mi had a question that intrigued her. How could Zhang Yi not care that they were digging into his base? He asked Shinshin to explain. They have equipment that will detect the proximity of anything underground. Letting them expend energy on this is part of the strategy now. Many of them began to die from cold and exhaustion. Those who attempted to rebel would be punished, and definitively so, as he would not allow anyone to go back on their agreement. A few days later, Liang became tense and called Zhang Yi, informing him that people were dying. He replied that he would start executing his plan soon, but had some questions for her. The first was why the number of mutant attacks was decreasing every day. Liang explained that only the leaders were attacking now, while the others were in the village to prevent any rebellion from the dying villagers. Then Zhang Yi said he understood and agreed with her, preparing to act. He left through a secret passage and with his snowmobile drove to Chun's base in his high-ranking military uniform. As soon as the soldier saw it was a superior, he showed respect. At that moment, his life was taken mercilessly. With this first one eliminated, other soldiers inside the village smelled blood and the reaction of the dogs. They went after the culprit, who was wearing the uniform of a superior. They engaged in combat and were completely eliminated by the mutant with dimensional powers and an incredibly sharp sword. When the high-ranking mutants who were away from the village noticed the alert signal, they returned as quickly as possible to the base. Zhang Yi, after eliminating hundreds of soldiers in the village, went to Chun and took him to his mansion with the snowmobile. When they returned to the village, they found the bodies of their comrades strewn around. The captain concluded that there must be a traitor for him to know they were out, and that among them, and that this person must have informed Zhang Yi about the tunnel as as well. He left the village after promising himself that he would find them, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, the elderly man was distressed because he didn't know what to say to the villagers whose loved ones had died without receiving any reward. Zhang Yi, on the other hand, was showing Chun her new room. He immediately embraced his new girlfriend. After leaving the room, he went to the control room where Liang and Xinxin were. The teacher had also been brought to the base and had become a traitor to the military base. Xinxin began to explain how she used the information she obtained from Liang to invade the base's systems. She cut off communication from Zishan's military base with Captain Feng's team. This left our MC pleased with his super hacker Loli. He then went to Liang and promised that he would save his students once he eliminated the threat from the leaders. However, his conversation was interrupted by the arrival of troops at the emergency exit. He said he was waiting for them and that it was time for war. Within seconds, he escaped from prison and appeared before them. One of the leaders pointed out that the target was alone and exposed right there. With great anger, one of them advanced to kill Zhang Yi. Even though his colleague tried to warn him about his recklessness, he was determined to kill Zhang Yi. As he approached close enough and thought he would succeed, Zhang Yi pressed a button on the ground, which was connected to a bomb that exploded and dumped tons of snow on him. On the other side, they spotted the traitor Liang, while Feng urged her to pay the price for her betrayal. But Liang explained that she had never been one of them and began her fight with the captain. One of the leaders, even using an ice wall to defend herself, was torn to pieces by the kitty flower. When this happened, Feng lost concentration upon seeing his dead companion, but quickly regained focus with Liang's next attack. Moreover, due to the explosions caused by Zhang Yi everywhere and the powerful and resilient mutants being destroyed, the protagonist with his rifle was relentless. His soldiers were all grouped between Zhang Yi and Chun, who was behind them. All used their powers and unleashed an avalanche of snow on them all. Teacher Liang hurried to flee with the kitty. She grabbed the otaku on the way, and the captain couldn't do anything to stop the traitors from escaping. They were all just cornered by the snow powers of the chubby one, and now they were facing their great enemy, Zhang Yi. He said he would teach them how to use their own weapons. The fools fell for such a simple trick. The protagonist retrieves from his dimensional warehouse and shoots one of the loads of explosives towards them. This made almost all of them die. Few of them who did not lose their lives under the snow could barely recover and saw a giant avalanche over them. Everyone was now covered by meters of snow that they could not get out of. Now everyone was buried in this icy place. The protagonist calls Xinxin to warn that the calculations she made were perfect. Their position and the avalanche were exact. Now everyone can return home victorious. The teacher suggests they should look for the captain and make sure he was dead, but Zhang Yi confirms that he will slowly turn into ice cream under that snow and die for sure. After that, they returned home. The MC joined his wives to enjoy some good wine. Zhang Yi, while enjoying the moment, told Jokir that she should be grateful for being one of the few people in the world to survive so well. From this moment on, our heroes began to live happily ever after, and thus we have reached the end of the first season of this story of the evil Ice King. Whoever leaves a like, legends say, and will have their waifus guaranteed.
Yeah, boy.
Of all the elite soldiers who died in the attack against Zhang Yi, one survived, Captain Feng. He was the only one to return to the base, and their leader was furious at the loss of nearly half of their elite men. Their team consisted of 50 people with exceptional abilities, and their deaths greatly weakened the base and its ability to defend itself in the future. Feng's conscience began to trouble him when he realized that those who had died were considered his brothers, and for this reason, he knelt and apologized to the leader for his leadership failure. He was even willing to die as punishment for his failure to lead his team. However, he also expressed his desire for a second chance to prove his worth and to avenge Zhang Yi, who had cruelly killed his followers and colleagues. Meanwhile, the leader considered whether she should kill Feng and use him as an example to others, but she knew she couldn't afford to lose her most powerful mutant. She decided to punish him by imprisoning him for an entire week to reflect on his mistakes. As Feng departed, the leader began to consider how to handle the situation and decided they needed to stop trying to attack Zhang Yi immediately and focus on replenishing the forces they lost in the previous attack. She was aware that there were other bases with similar strength to theirs, and she feared they might attack upon discovering that their army was weakened. Therefore, she summoned her secretary and inquired about the condition of the people they had brought from the village. She replied that they were still undergoing medical examinations, but so far, they were physically well and had a good chance of developing abilities. She ordered to start the experiments immediately, even if they failed to awaken abilities. They should inject Feng's cells into them, as he was their most powerful mutant. She warned that more than 90% of them would likely die if they did so, but he replied that he didn't care about the peasants' lives and was only interested in replacing the soldiers who had died. He knew he needed to bolster his forces to conquer and rule the entire city of Tianhai, but without soldiers and significant strength, it would be impossible. He realized he needed to postpone the matter of the missiles for now and try to negotiate with Zhang Yi to join Zishan's base. So, Leader Chen instructed one of her followers to prepare all the information to contact Zhang Yi. They provided him with a laptop and headphones, and before making the call, Chen decided that if Zhang Yi refused to cooperate, they would use the missiles. Zhang Yi greeted him, saying that Professor Liang had spoken highly of him and that he was impressed by his leadership ability at Zishan's base. Chen felt he was being mocked by his manner of speaking and became irritated, stating that what he he was doing was not in his interest. Zhang Yi replied that he knew very well that he was just a weak man since he couldn't face him after more than 50 of his men failed to do so in the past few days. So Zhang Yi continued to taunt him and asked how he would kill him after more than 50 of his men failed to do so. It was then that he became furious. Chen explained that he would not send anyone else to his bunker but missiles with enough force to destroy the entire bunker. Surprised, Zhang Yi replied that he knew he was lying since there was no base to launch missiles in the city of Tianhai. Chen said he knew people in the neighboring city who had a military base with missiles and who were responsible for bombing their base. Although Zhang Yi was beginning to be convinced by his words, saying he didn't want to attack him with the rockets because he admired his talent and wanted to recruit him. Zhang Yi couldn't believe him on this rocket matter and therefore said he wanted proof that he had rockets. Throw some nearby for him to see. The leader called him stupid. Missiles aren't wasted to prove to someone that they have them. Zhang Yi began to realize by the way he spoke that he wasn't lying to him, but Zhang Yi couldn't believe his words. Our protagonist asked for a few days to think and respond. Chen agreed to give him only one day. Upon ending the call, the leader begins to pray that Zhang Yi accepts his threat and he doesn't have to waste such a precious resource. Our scoundrel protagonist wondered if he should just escape from this shelter for now. Xin doubted whether the leader of the Xinshan base really had these missiles in his hands to use, as he sent so many soldiers and didn't use these missiles before. Zhang Yi said there really is a military base in the neighboring city that has these weapons. If they take that risk and get bombed, it's the end of everything. Zhou Qier then asks if they couldn't go back to where they lived before. Zhang Yi says, yes, that will be the first thing they do to protect themselves. The security of his harem is the most important thing. Chun was the saddest as she had just arrived in this warm paradise. Professor Liang reminds him that he promised to save her children. He can't forget that. Zhang Yi stares at his computer lowly and then grabs a small chip from her and hands it to Liang, telling her that the rescue of her students depends on her success. As soon as she inserts this into a computer in the central area, everything will be possible. Liang left the base without being seen by anyone, still with access keys to important parts of the base, as she was the leader there, and as she walked, she encountered two of the staff, so she stopped to listen to them, while the staff talked about her and how they didn't expect Liang to leave, while leaving her students alone. This was a betrayal, so Leader Chen decided to experiment on all her students and many of the villagers. When these scientists left and got into an argument, Liang finally began to speak with Zhang Yi to say that they needed to get her students out of here as quickly as possible. He then said again, she must put the chip into a computer in the central area, and then he will be able to get all the students to escape. If she succeeds, he will honor his promise to provide shelter and food for her students for a while. Of course, Liang was tense at that moment, as she knew that the computer room was one of the most closely watched, but she also knew she needed to do it if she wanted to save her students and destroy the entire base forever. She finished speaking with him and set off to fulfill the mission. Zhang Yi was in the car with his girls, heading to Building 25. He told Xin that if Liang succeeds, they will devise a plan to attack the mountain military base. The lowly girl also reminded him that the information they could steal from them would be very valuable for the future. Zhang Yi says that unknown forces are indeed more worrying. When they find out more about them, at least they will know how to confront them. Their optimistic conversation was interrupted by Karen. She was worried about Professor Liang and afraid they would capture her and beat her to death. As she expressed her concern for her teacher, Zhang Yi smiled and thought to himself that she was just being naive. To him, it didn't matter if she lived or died anyway. But of course, he was a hypocrite and told Karen that good people always have good luck. Karen was convinced by this and said that Liang really is a kind person and will be lucky. But in reality, our scoundrel was laughing inwardly. He didn't believe any of it. After a while, they arrived in the Yuanluo area, where Uncle Yu was waiting for them with his new wife and was willing to help them. Meanwhile, Chun was sad and crying because she left her inflatable wife behind. Zhang Yi looked around and realized there was no sound in the area, so he was confident that all the neighbors had died, but his thoughts were interrupted by his uncle's lewd voice, who was glad that Zhang Yi and his friends were still okay. When our lovers' gang returned to where it all began, many memories came fluting back. Zhu Haimei told everyone to make themselves comfortable. There were many people and not so many rooms, but they wouldn't have trouble squeezing in a bit. Yang Mi was excited to have more company and said they could all play board games together. Zhang Yi went to the living room to talk to his uncle and ask how the neighborhood was, if anyone was still alive or if everyone had already died, and if anyone tried to attack them and steal their resources from the neighbors, as they used to do. Uncle Yu replied that at first they came begging for food. After they got nothing, they tried to be aggressive, so this old man taught them a lesson. However, despite all this, there is still a group of people alive so far, so Zhang Yi was surprised and looked out the window, although he knew he wouldn't see anything, which made Yu continue his conversation and clarify that the people who survived so far were the residents of building number 18. Zhang Yi was surprised by his words and asked him if he knew more details about them or about the number of people who were still alive in this building. Uncle Yu replied that he didn't have knowledge of these things because he didn't communicate with them, although sometimes he saw them coming out and moving around the streets. Zhang Yi became excited and wanted to know how they were still alive like this, and decided to visit them as soon as possible. But first he explained everything about the missile threat from the leader of the Xishan mountain base. The poor guy just wanted to live a simple life with plenty of luxury luxury and food, why couldn't he? And when he finished speaking, he told him that he didn't believe Shinan really had rockets. Yu sadly replied that Hoover has many things, also attracts much attention because of it. Even he himself, who has much less than Zhang Yi, is constantly attacked by people wanting his resources. Our protagonist says he will stay out of his main base for a while until he has the strength to annihilate his new enemy. After this conversation, Uncle Yu continued to inform him that a strange group had appeared in their neighborhood recently and had not yet tried to attack them. This group calls themselves Servants of the Snow. While the girls play with Shinshin, the uncle talks about how at the time he underestimated these people, thought they were just crazy religious fanatics, but at the time they offered the possibility of increasing and training the uncle's powers. He was suspicious of them and refused, but this group went to another person in the neighborhood as well. As they talked, Zhang Yi looked out the window and noticed strange movements in this building, and to understand what was happening, he had to go see everything personally. And when he asked him if he needed help or something, Zhang Yi replied that it was not necessary. These people were all much weaker than him. The protagonist warned his girls that he was going to visit an old friend and they don't need to worry. He went to building 18 and without worrying about anything, he just shot up and drew Lin Jian's attention. The man seeing this demon again became terrified. This monster had returned. He went to his wife and son not knowing what to do. His son, upon learning that Person had returned, asked why they had to fight against this man. His furious wife said they should join together now and fight against him. Lin Jian, unlike them, calmed down and replied that even if all the residents of the neighborhood joined forces, they still wouldn't stand a chance. He told his wife to hide and protect their last hope. When Zhang Yi saw him, he told him that he missed him for a long time. The residents of the building came out to see what was happening through the windows, which surprised Zhang Yi because he didn't know that all these people were still alive. He immediately approached Lin Jian and asked him how he had done it. Lin Jian replied that the credit was his and of the seeds that the protagonist left behind before. Surprised, Zhang Yi asked if he was serious or joking with him because he thought it was impossible for these seeds to grow and be ready for harvest in less than a month, and it was impossible for them to grow from the beginning in this atmosphere. Zhang Yi activated his abilities and said that he felt another mutant nearby, but it seems that the reason Lin Jian was tense was another, so he apologized to Zhang Yi and killed him if he wanted to punish them for their failure. The residents started coming out of the building in large numbers, and seeing their leader in this position, they began to shout that he couldn't kill him. They wouldn't let the great leader who saved them all this time die in front of them. Some people stepped forward and said that if lives needed to be taken, he could take others, but their leader should stay alive. This left Zhang Yi very surprised at this loyalty to this person he judged weak in the past. Their looks were sincere, and they were willing to give their lives. He then calmed the situation and asked why they think he wants them dead. They told him that the baby he left in their care did not survive, knowing that the reason for all this fear was Ji Lemei's child that he wanted to get rid of. The reason they were afraid is that they believed the baby was important to him. Zhang Yi then explained to everyone that a baby surviving in such a terrible time as this would be a miracle. He knows very well that the death of the child was not due to their negligence. He is here to find out how they managed to survive. He wants to see these seeds with his own eyes. Lin Jian told him to enter the building with him to show him. As they were on their way, Lin Jian began to explain that they tried to plant the seeds he gave them several times, but failed completely and all the seeds died. However, everything changed after the group of people from the snow sect appeared and offered to help them. They made it clear that they should worship the snow god in return, so Lin Jian gained his power. Although it was painful at the time, he managed to survive and get his new power, which with his help, he can make the seeds grow inside his body, so he is called the Plant Man. The products his body produces contain much higher nutrients than normal products and also grow quickly in any environment. Zhang Yi was surprised and asked him what he used as fertilizer to plant this because only his body couldn't produce so much food. Lin Jian replied that the sight might be a bit scary for him. Of course, Zhang Yi didn't care and entered the room immediately, finding a group of corpses growing plants on them, literally. Lin Jian explained to him that they used these bodies to fertilize the seeds, as there were many bodies in all the buildings around. Curious about this, Zhang Yi asked the number of rooms where they planted seeds in this way. There were 3 rooms so far, and they didn't need a larger amount at the moment. This idea of self-sufficiency is good and all, but if it continues like this, Zhang Yi warned that his body will not resist and will certainly die after a while. Lin Jian seemed to know this and accept this fact. Using his power made him feel a lot of pain, but he is willing to do anything to keep his wife and son alive here. Although Zhang Yi thought the idea of sacrificing himself was irrational, he was also impressed with his courage, so he asked if he could show his power now. Our selfish protagonist wanted to know if his power was considered natural, like his, or artificial, like those of the people from the military base. Also, he wanted to make sure if Lin Jian's power was specialized only in the growth of crops, or if it had any offensive use. Lin Jian was then willing to show his ability. By making a lot of effort, one of the seeds in his arm began to grow rapidly until it sprouted completely. Seeing this disgusting thing, Zhang Yi warned that it was enough. Just this effort took a lot of energy from poor Lin Jian. He went to the door and asked for help and grabbed another new plant. Thinking about what he saw, Zhang Yi was sure that this ability is very convenient to get food at this time, and if he had seen that this ability could be dangerous against him, our cruel protagonist would have killed Lin Jian right here and all his residents if necessary. After finding out everything he wanted, he left Lin Jian and his residents alone. The leader of Building 18, seeing the great villain leaving, thinks that this improvised proof worked, but their lives continue in Zhang Yi's hands. Our MC returned home, and now all that was left was to wait and see how things would unfold with the missiles before making any moves. He could only think of attacking if Liang managed to put a spy chip into the military base's computers. The new enslaved residents of the military base were being taken to their places of work. Many residents were outraged. A father cried as he said these people ate their food, took their homes, and killed his father and daughter. They are 100 times worse than Zhang Yi. Those who complained about the injustice of reality were punished with eternal rest. Anyone who doesn't want to meet the same fate must obey. The soldiers sent themselves as sacrifices to help. Now they must repay that with their work. Guys, I feel sorry for these people. They tried to do this to Zhang Yi before, but now they're tasting the same medicine. What do you think about this? While all this was happening, Liang was observing from afar. She knew the villagers who died would turn into yogurt, but then she decided to focus on the mission and went up to the second floor, where she explained that there were 5 main sections, including the food and nutrition section. However, security on the second floor was not as strict, as Leader Chen was more interested in the 4th floor. So, invading the control room seemed easy at the moment. As she approached the room, she looked around to make sure it was safe, but she was surprised by someone putting their hand on her shoulder. She was tense, ready to attack, but before she could do anything, the person began yelling at her to wait, claiming they were not an enemy. She realized it was one of her students named Tian. The boy was also surprised and asked why she had come back after fleeing. She came back to save him and his classmates. She asked how he managed to join the soldiers, and Tian explained what happened. People are taken to undergo experiments, and he was the only successful experiment among them all. People are put between life and death by methods that make him cry. Just remembering, those who survive can serve the base and have a better life, but in return, their vitality is drained when they use their powers. Liang was surprised and asked what he wanted to do. Tian said he not only wanted to leave the base, but also to get revenge on the people who tortured them and destroyed their lives. She then consoles her student and says there is hope to save those who survived and to get revenge. After agreeing on a strategy, he went to talk to the other soldiers and relayed the order that they should go ensure the protection of the control room. Meanwhile, Liang prepared to install the chip into the computers. We return to our villain at home. On this day, the period that base leader Chen Xinyan had given him to respond if he would serve him ended. When they make the Discord call, Zhang Yi replies that he will not ally with him and is not afraid. Upon hearing this, Chen Xinyan becomes furious and threatens to blow him up with his bunker and his family. Zhang Yi said he can do as he pleases and just wait for the consequences, and then hangs up the call. He felt that the talk about the missiles was real from Chen Xinyan's actions, but even so, it was impossible to join her. The important thing was just to find another place to live. However, all these thoughts were interrupted by a message from Liang, in which she said she had done her part of the deal and installed the spy chip in the computer. Now, all that was left was for him to fulfill his part and help her get her students out of the Zhishan base. Zhang Yi rushed to Xinshin and quickly told her that Liang managed to install the chip. This got the 4-wheel girl very excited. She grabbed her car and drove to her computer. In a matter of seconds, even though she was working on a regular computer, she had accessed all the data from the enemy military base. Xinjin said no one could stop her. He approached to see what she had, and at that moment, the girl got wet. Zhang Yi wanted to know about the missiles. Could he access information about them? The girl then, accessing the conversations between the leaders of the city bases, and they were talking about sending missiles at a common enemy of the military. This scared the two of them, so Chen Xinyan's threat was real. This made Zhang Yi sad. Losing such an incredible bunker is very bad. The 4-wheel girl then says she has a bold plan and asks if he's up for some fun now. The plan was to send the coordinates of the Zhishan mountain base as the target for the missiles to hit instead of their own bunker. This impressed Zhang Yi, and he asked her if she was confident they wouldn't be able to detect the change. Xin confidently explained how it would be done and that it was impossible for them to find out. The coordinates would be altered by her. Chen Xinyan's allies, thinking they were attacking the right place, wouldn't know anything. After the orders were sent, the 4-wheel girl would cut communication between the two bases during the missile launch. Our villain protagonist asked Karen to examine the construction plans of the base to understand if it would be possible to destroy it. The girl said it couldn't be destroyed with a missile attack because the basey structure was extremely strong and extended 100 meters below the ground. This meant that not even missiles would be able to destroy it. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi was not satisfied. Not even this could destroy his enemy's base. He ordered Xinshin to proceed with the plan to launch the missiles over Chen Xinyan's base, and also wanted to know all the defense systems and weapons that the Zhishan base possessed. After making these requests and her saying she would do everything, Zhang Yi left the room without saying anything else. Karen didn't understand his intentions. Xinshin said he intends to personally attack the military base to eliminate them, but he is very cautious and not sure if he wants to risk so much for it. He went to think about it. Zhang Yi thinks that just because he has survived Leader Chen's attacks so far, he is safe, despite the many risks. This may be the only opportunity to invade the this base and eliminate his enemy.